respected President, respected Principal, respected dignitaries, dear delegates, dear friends, good morning to one and all. I am very happy to share the platform and take the assignment of welcoming all the delegates. Importantly, today's guest, the famous poet and novelist, Dayadisa Nayake, who is a renowned literarian, who is a bilingual writer, poet, author of the first e-novel from Asia and the first singular novel, winner of the Sri Lanka State Award for the Best English Novel 3 times, and also a SARC Literary Award. Such a famous personality is with us. On behalf of Kandasamy Kandas College, Paramati Velur, Namakkal, and Cap Comarin Trust, India, I extend hearty welcome to our chief guest and happy to introduce him to the delegates. And I request Dr. Daya Disanayake to present his views and enlighten us with his deep thinking and knowledge. Thank you, brothers. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for inviting me for this wonderful occasion. I am really honored to have this opportunity. I thank Dr. Regin Silvest and the organizers for this opportunity. When I was invited to give a talk, I selected the topic Translation for World Literature. This topic itself creates a lot of problems with regard to the terms used. World literature was called Vishwa Sahitya by Mahakavi Rabindranath in a speech delivered at the Jatiya Shiksha Parishad about 120 years ago. Both words, Vishwa Sahitya, are used and accepted in most of South Asia. And universally, we could use the word Sahitya, but let's take the meaning as original Sanskrit word Sahitya, because literature has we don't have a real term for the English term literature. The real problem comes with the term translation, a word we have borrowed from the West and used indiscriminately for all creative literature works which are rewritten in other languages. A popular word in South Asia could be Anuvada, but it is also not the same as translation. And like translation, it could mean so many things. My Tamil friends in Sri Lanka suggested the Tamil word Molipeyarappu. I hope my pronunciation is correct. I would like to consider all Sahitya from South Asia as one Sahitya, and that it should be a major portion of Vishwa Sahitya, because our Sahitya, our literature from South Asia is far more advanced than what we find from the West. If I may quote from Guru Rabindranath, from his speech so many decades ago, do not so much as imagine that I will show you the way to such a world literature. Each of us must make his way forward according to his own means and abilities. All I have wanted to say is that just as the world is not merely the sum of your plough field plus my plough field plus his plough field, because to know the world that way is only to know it with a yokel, like parochialism. Similarly, world literature is not merely the sum of your writing plus my writing plus his writings. We generally see literature in this limited provincial manner. To free oneself of the regional narrowness and the resolve to see the universal being in world literature, to apprehend such totality in every writer's work, and to see its interconnectedness with every man's attempt at self expression, that is the objective we need to pledge ourselves to. In order to achieve a Vishwa Sahitya, we need to have a common medium of expression. Unlike painting, sculpture, music, or dance, we are confined to written or oral expressions using a language. Today, we are using English, which is probably the linked language in our part of the world. Language has become a major barrier among mankind, even within borders, and we need to overcome or demolish this barrier if we are to reach out beyond borders. There would have been no language barriers even beyond geographical or physical borders when man lived without erecting borders of their own. If we talk about evolution of language, but what would have really happened was a gradual deterioration as each community began to drift apart with their own language and built borders around themselves, keeping all other communities out. Every year, the world celebrates the International Mother Language Day. But if UNESCO and the United Nations are seriously committed for the unity and well being of mankind, they should realize that the mother tongue is a major obstacle to achieve this goal. They should work towards a mother language for all the children of Mother Earth, a universal language, a Vishwa Bhasha. In order for us to realize the urgent need of a universal language, we have to first understand the evils of having over 6,900 different languages listed around the world. In India, there are around 400 listed live languages with newspapers published in about 100 languages and about 58 languages taught in schools around the country. In Sri Lanka, we have only 3 languages, but we still have to use English as the link language. We would have enjoyed an independence, real independence, millions of years ago when our ancestors first developed the capability of speech as a means of communication. But we lost this capability sometimes along the ladder of evolution as man started spreading out from Central Africa to every corner of the world. Perhaps it was a cruel joke played upon man by nature, or an experiment which went wrong as Homo sapiens was trapped in the Tower of Babel, where they could not understand each other. It happened only to man, because all other animals appear to be communicating among the same species in a common voice. A dog anywhere on earth barks in the same way, and so does a lark sing. When each tribe, clan, or ethnic group developed a different language for their own use and identified themselves by their language, they began to talk of a mother tongue. When one such group became a majority in a geographical region and considered the region belonged to them, then all other smaller groups using other languages became minorities. And that is when everybody lost their independence of communication, both the majority and the minorities. Everybody who did not use our own language becomes strangers, outsiders, or foreigners to us. Importance of the mother tongue has its benefits. Bangladesh is the best example in the modern world, where the love of their mother tongue united the people to struggle for and create their own country. The curse of the mother tongue resulted in the 30-year war in Sri Lanka because the language was the cause of the conflict. The only difference between a Tamil Hindu and a Sinhala Buddhist is the language, but we still fought with each other. When people of different languages or groups gathered in one place, they remained so far apart as when they had been geographically. If a farmer from Bihar were to come to Vellore, it would be nearly impossible for him to communicate with a farmer here. But it is not his fault because in ancient times, traders traveled all over the world. They were capable to communicate with so many different people using so many different languages. So were the missionaries of all religions. Even after man built his language barriers, traders managed to overcome such barriers as they went around the world. Traders from the Middle East could communicate with traders from the Indus civilization probably even 10,000 years ago, and with those from the Far East, and with all the traders speaking in so many tongues in South Asia. The geographical borders we have overcome with all the travel facilities we have developed. But to overcome the man-made political barriers, we need the passport and visa. Even then, we cannot overcome the language barriers, though we use the same tongue. Today, if our linguists, anthropologists, sociologists, and writers were to pool their knowledge, experience, and skills, we could find there are no pure languages in the world, just like the blood running in our bodies. We have so much common in almost every language, especially in South Asia. Sadly, we are also faced with language chauvinism. My language is older than yours. My language is superior to yours. More people speak my language. Sometimes the language chauvinism is not about our own mother tongue, but an alien tongue which we are adopting. In our part of the world, it is English. We look down on those who are unable to read, write, or even speak English. Though we call this the post-colonial era, and we talk of post-colonial literature, we are still enslaved by a colonial mindset, worshipping the colonial language. We are still enslaved by a colonial language, and in a way, we should also respect this colonial language because that's the only practical way uh, for us in this room of Babel to communicate with each other. And literacy is seen as the ability to read, write, and understand a symbol system which is used for communication, which means the prehistoric man was also literate when he wrote on the cave walls as paintings and for communication. But it is literate chauvinism which makes us feel so superior to a farmer in a remote village who has to place his thumbprint on a document because he does not know how to sign his name. Yet, the traditional knowledge the farmer has is far greater than all the agricultural scientists could learn in a lifetime. Those who study in elite schools feel superior to a child who had his education in a village school, superior to a person with just a high school education or only a bachelor's degree, superior to a person who had not read Kafka, Sartre, or Plato, while others show their superiority by dropping names like Coelho and Allende and Murakami, even though they have not read, sometimes not even heard of their own writers of their own country. That is why the urban elite learned the religion of India from Max Weber and the Buddhists learned Buddhism from Edwin Arnold. We celebrate independence on the false belief we gained uh, because we think we gained independence when we got rid of the British. For man to achieve true independence in communications and in all other ways, he has to develop a universal language, a language common to all human beings. It is not just a distant dream, but a vision we could make a reality in the near future by making use of all the electronic technology now available. It could be a computer generated language to be read and understood by people all over the world, making instant communication with everyone. Perhaps this talk could be translated to other languages simultaneously by a machine. The first step could be the simultaneous translation of such communications. This universal language would not need a written script. The computers can use their own language independent systems because by this time man would be in the tertiary orality in the near future, where he would not and need not be able to read and write. The prediction is by about 2050, people would be illiterate because they need not read or write. Language, as we know it, is an adaptation unique to humans, as far as we know today. When and where language originated and how it evolved has still not been clearly understood since it belongs to prehistory. Since its ability would have developed in different regions of Earth as human groups develop, the forms of speech would have changed, and that is why we can't understand each other. But till we develop a universal language, translations are necessary, especially today, when the world is becoming smaller, when we are getting closer to all the people around the globe, and that includes the writers. When we get to know the writers and their work, when we have some idea what they write about and their society, their culture, we like to read their work. But our language ability is limited. It limits our reading to books written in the only languages we know. The books written in other languages could be read only in translation. We had translations from a worldwide language to a lesser known language of a lesser known culture, and vice versa. Most often it's a one-way traffic because today world literature mostly includes work written in the dominant popular languages, and because literature is also a big business and a fast selling commodity. Publishers and booksellers encourage and promote translation of such better known popular books. But there is hardly any market demand for translations of lesser cultures, lesser communities written in lesser known languages. Because of the market demand, often translations are done from translations done into other more popular languages like Russian, German, Japanese literature coming to us from the English translations. This also happens with translations of lesser known languages which get translated into other lesser known languages through translations into a popular language. A very sad example is Gitanjali. In Sri Lanka, we have about 8 translations in Sinhala, all translations from the English translation. The problem comes if we try to back translate, which we often face when we have to quote our own writers from a translation when we can't access the original work. Gurudev Rabindranath wrote in Bengali, which is spoken only by about 8% of the total Indian population. The others had to read this work in translation in their own languages or in English, and it would not have been the same as reading him in his own writing. There would have been many variations in the translations too, because translating Gurudev is not an easy task. There are 38 different translations of Gitanjali in Hindi and 6 in Kannada. William Yeats, who introduced the Gitanjali to Yeats, claims that not only the translations into German, Russian, French, and even most of the translations into other Indian languages had been done from the English translation and not from the original Bengali. What we have seen is a version created by Yeats and not the original Rabindranath work. Because Gurudev had written to his niece Indira Devi, I simply felt an urge to recapture through the medium of another language the feelings and sentiments which had created such a feast of joy within me in the days gone by. But to quote William Rothenstein, who passed the manuscript to Yeats, he had said, I do believe that the changes that Yeats made to the order and selection of the poems, to the paragraphing, to the punctuation, and above all to Tagore's choice of words and phrases would have contributed to Tagore's growing feeling over time that in the English Gitanjali, as presented and edited by Yeats, he had betrayed his true self. Because Yeats, 2 decades later, had said, Tagore knows no English. No Indian knows English. Nobody can write with music and style in a language not learned in childhood and since then the language of his thoughts. I went into detail about the Gitanjali as an example of what we are losing in translation. And we sometimes are faced with the need for back translation. Most of our modern translations that flood our bookshops today are translations of translations. And if we try to back translate them into the original language, it would be very difficult to predict what comes out. In reality, some of the translations have to be back translated by the reader in his mind to really understand a phrase or even a sentence if the translator had not really understood the background, the culture, and the time period in which the original work had been written. I will just give one example from Mark Twain about back translation. In 1865, he wrote the celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras Country. A few years later, he wrote another story with a longer title, The Jumping Frog, in English, then in French, and then clawed back into a civilized language once more by patient, unremunerated toil. He says he found someone had translated the story into French and thus decided to back translate it. But Mark Twain admitted, I cannot speak the French language, but I can translate very well, though not fast, I being self-educated. That was Mark Twain at his best. The title was back translated as The Frog Jumping of the County of Calaveras. I pulled out just one sentence out of the story. Mark Twain's back translation said, if there was of races, you him find rich or ruined at the end. If it here is a combat of dogs, he bring his bed. He himself laid always for a combat of cats. The original Mark Twain was, if there was a horse race, you will find him flush or you would find him busted at the end of it. If there was a dog fight, he would bet on it. If there was a cat fight, he would bet on it. And we face all these issues because we are on turbo drive when it comes to translation of popular world literature into lesser known languages. It is a rat race. In the end, it is the reader who pays for it with his money, with his time, and worst of all, ending up with misinformation or reading a novel which is nowhere near the original. Despite all the obstacles, we have to depend on translation. We should also translate all the literary works of South Asia into all South Asian languages and also into English to introduce them to the rest of the world, to enable the 500 million English speaking people on earth to read. And that is why I believe that for now we have to depend on translations if we are to bring the great literature from South Asia into world literature, into Vishwa Sahitya. So until we could develop Vishwa Bhasha, let's still depend on translation, but let us be careful when we translate. Let us select the best books that should be translated, that should be introduced to other readers, and let's be careful to do justice to the original writer, to the reader, and to the world at large by giving a correct interpretation of the original meanings, especially when we translate poetry. Within the short period available, I trust I had summed up some of my ideas. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Let me start my presentation. My presentation topic is title is English Language Education 4.0 in the Bangladesh context, defining teachers and learners. Here, 4.0 means the fourth industrial revolution. And to understand the fourth industrial revolution, we have to have some ideas of the earlier three industrial revolutions. The industrial revolution started with the first one that's termed 1.0. It was built on machinery for water and steam production, and it happened in 1760s. 70s. Then the second industrial revolution occurred in 1870s, just around 100 after 100 years, and that stamped 2.0, and it was built on mass production of dividing labor and using electricity. And then happened the third industrial revolution, and it happened in 1960s. It was built on electronic usage and information technology, facilitating mass adjustments and flexibility of automation and robot-based manufacturing. Then happened the fourth industrial revolution that stamped 4.0, and it's prevailing now. The fourth industrial revolution is built on cyber physical system and manufacturing collaboration. As my today's talk is concerned with the fourth industrial revolution and English language education, let's have some more ideas of the fourth industrial revolution. This revolution is marked by an advancement in manufacturing digitalization driven by increased data volume, computing power, and connectivity, the emergence of analysis, ability, and business intelligence, the occurrence of new forms of interaction between humans and machines, and digital transfer instructions to the physical world, such as robotics and 3D painting. That's the fourth industrial revolution being a current trend of automation and digitalization of industries has impacted on all aspects of our lives, including English language education. English language education 4.0 encompasses several features and factors. Number one, open access. Open access to different online sources, internet sources, without any fees or charges. Individualized education is the second important factor, uh, which is in the fourth industrial revolution. Then mental transformation. Number four, integration of digital technologies to education. Number five, seamless learning environments. Number six, lifelong and sustainable learning. Number seven, exploratory education. And finally, multidisciplinary education. So when we are thinking of and planning English language education 4.0, we have to include all these factors or features in our curriculum. English language teachers have to plan some effective and efficient strategies to impart language skills and knowledge in facing the digital era. That's they integrate technology during the lesson. That's input technologies, for example, interactive whiteboards, projectors, virtual reality headsets, interactive technologies, including, for example, online quizzes, video conferencing, etc., and portable technologies, including smartphones. Now I'm using my smartphone for my presentation, tablets, and head-mounted displays. English language learners need to have many roles to achieve in their learning outcomes in the fourth industrial revolution. For both English language teachers and learners, technology is normally now computers, tablets, smartphones, and the internet in many contexts. The objective of the study on which my presentation is based. The current study was planned to ascertain and define the characteristics and qualifications of the teachers and learners of English education 4.0 in the Bangladesh context. To carry out the study, I reviewed some relevant studies, a body of literature. Successful implementation of educational technology hinges upon the mindsets and motivation of teachers who eventually determine how it's used on-site and or online. Uh, then Levy 2012 sums up 5 levels at which technology can support English language education. Number one, the physical level, with tools such as mobile phones, digital cameras, laptops, and tablets, etc. Number two, the management level. It includes learning management systems. Number three, the applications level. It covers word processing software, email, and chat clients, social networking sites, and blogs. Number four, the resource level. It allows access to authentic materials such as online newspapers, magazines, websites, and so on. And then finally, number five, the component technology level, such as spelling checkers, grammar checkers, electronic dictionaries, and other support tools. In the literature review, I have considered several studies. Yeah, I would like to mention some researchers whose studies I reviewed to conduct my study. Alberini 2004, Kumar ATAL 2008, Sumak 2010, Al Zayedin ETAL 2010, Abdul Rahim 2014, Abu Khatchala 2016, Razak ETAL 2018. Yeah, just I have mentioned some major studies I reviewed to find research gaps and formulate my research questions in this study. The literature review shows that teachers as well as the learners were not ready yet to use technology in English language teaching and learning, respectively. Traditional and cultural ways of teaching and the understanding and attitudes towards technology hinder teachers from using technology. The studies reviewed recommend teachers training in using technology and suitable devices to enable them to apply very technological instruments. Therefore, the research gaps basically include uncovering and understanding the characteristics and qualifications of the teachers as well as the learners of English language education 4.0 in the Bangladesh context. Based on the research gaps, I formulated 3 research questions. Number one, what does English language education 4.0 refer to? Number two, how can the characteristics and qualifications of the teachers of English language education 4.0 be described? And number three, what are the characteristics and qualifications the learners of English language education 4.0 need to have? To carry out the research, I designed a methodology. Basically, the methodology is based on both the qualitative and quantitative approaches. That's why I should say my study was conducted through a mixed method approach. In this study, 20 teachers, 20 English language teachers working at different public and private universities uh, participated. Besides, 200 students of those universities, public and private universities, participated in the study. It means I collected data from 20 teachers and 200 students of different public and private universities in Bangladesh. To collect information from the teacher and learner respondents, I used two uh, types of instruments. Number one, I used teacher questionnaire. Number two, I used a student questionnaire. And for triangulation, I used semi-structured interviews with both teachers and students. And after the collection of the data, I used SPSS's 26.0 version for analysis of the quantitative data, and for qualitative data, I used the content analysis. Through the analysis of the data collected from both teachers and students, yeah, we have seen that 80% teachers identified open access, individualized education, mental transformation, integration of digital technologies to education, seamless learning environments, lifelong learning, exploratory education, and multidisciplinary education as the chief components of English language education 4.0. And here I should mention that as most of the students were not aware of the features and operations of English Education 4.0. They, in most cases, they didn't agree with the teachers. Secondly, 95% teachers preferred mental transformation, integration of digital technologies to education, seamless learning environments, and lifelong learning as the main features of English language education 4.0. And here, the students also differed from their teachers in many cases. It was also found that 100% learners didn't have any formal orientation to using educational technology on-site and or off-site. Because in Bangladesh, as we know, in most South Asian countries, including India and Bangladesh, education happens offsite, offsite, offline or on-site, in person, face to face. And both the teachers and students have that traditional mindset. They actually like the traditional in-person education, and they don't consider the online learning that much effective or attractive. Though 95% learners could attend classes through different online platforms such as Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, Google Classroom, to some extent, 75% were not yet ready for using language learning apps or software on-site and or off-site. 10% learners were used to using the traditional methods, while 90% were able to use digital technology to some extent. And here we should consider the point that younger people are smarter than the older people or in using technological tools. 80% teachers opined that learners needed collaboration skills, communication skills, technological skills, learning skills, and personal qualities unavoidable or essential. 90% teachers didn't have any formal training in and or qualifications for using educational technology on-site and off-site. Though 90% could use different online platforms such as Zoom, Meet, Teams, Google Classroom to some extent, 85% were not yet ready for using language teaching apps or software on-site or off-site. 70% teachers were used to using the traditional methods, while 30% were able to use digital technology to some extent. 85% teachers aspire to achieve technological skills, guidance skills, lifelong learning skills, and personal traits essential for English language education 4.0, whereas 15% teachers favor the traditional skills. Let's now have a look at the findings, consider the findings in brief. Open access, individualized education, mental transformation, integration of digital technologies to education, seamless learning environments, lifelong learning, exploratory education, and multidisciplinary education are found to be the main features of English language education 4.0. Secondly, learners need collaboration skills, communication skills, technological skills, learning skills, and personal qualities for English language education 4.0. Teachers need technological skills, guidance skills, lifelong learning skills, and personal traits essential for English language education 4.0. Based on the findings, the study recommends teacher training programs. Yeah, teachers should have training in using different technological tools, including softwares related to or relevant to English language education 4.0. And secondly, learner awareness raising programs in the skills they need to conform to and act with English language education 4.0 should be offered so that learners become aware of the features and functions of English language education 2.0. That's all about the recommendations of this paper based on the findings. And I have shown the references, specifically those uh, studies I reviewed and consulted to conduct my